Welcome to No Apologies. I'm Dana Lash. If you watch Legacy Press, there's one thing that you can be certain of, and is that there's zero interest in getting the true story ever. You can't trust a single thing that you're reading. The latest example is what's happening at the border. And instead of running through all this language that sets the story up, let's actually get into the story of what's happening at the border, where you have border agents who are accused of whipping people with horse reins, right? That's going to be the story now, instead of apparently the fact that the entire border is open right there before Mexico. I mean, the southern border is entirely open. There's no enforcement of it. So tons of people attempting to cross the border, and it's supposed to be tapering off, but unfortunately it's not. In fact, it's getting higher every single day. We're averaging 200,000 people trying to come across the border every month. And they're coming because they understand that the administration has no intention of enforcing any kind of border security. I don't know what the desire is. Maybe they maybe they think that they're going to be able to persuade people to vote for their causes. Maybe you have some of the big corporations who think that they're going to be able to get cheaper employment. Who knows? They could have a multitude of different reasons. But apparently nothing that's factoring in there is the safety and security of the citizens, many of whom are themselves legal immigrants, especially right here in Del Rio. So this is the story that matters. And this is the story that everybody should be paying attention to. And if the Legacy Press was at all interested in speaking any kind of truth to power, they would be holding elected officials accountable for these decisions that are leading to this. I mean, this is awful. Have you seen some of this video? Have you seen some of the kids that are involved in this video? It's heartbreaking. And this is all because of people in Washington, D.C. that are insisting that they follow federal law and preventing states from doing what they need to make sure that they're keeping their citizenry safe. You're not going to see this from any of the Legacy Press, because Legacy Press is non-existent anymore. It's legacy partisans. That's all you have. Narratives that are approved by one particular party, the one that's running DC right now. One of those narratives is that we're apparently a white supremacist nation. There's hardly a Democrat, hardly any of the media that ever said anything about America like this in the last 30 years until it became a useful narrative for advancing their agenda. And you can't transform a country that people love and want to preserve unless you get them to buy into this ridiculous agenda. Okay, so here's the story. Can we just get to that? So you have these border agents that are on horses that are actually using reins for the love. One of the things that we've noticed at the border is that it's not just people who are coming in from Colombia, not just people who are coming in from Venezuela. You have people who are also coming in from Haiti. You have an untold number of Haitians that apparently have illegally entered other Latin American countries and have stayed there, and now are taking advantage of this disaster that's happening at the southern border. And so now they're trying to come into the southern border, and they're increasing the numbers of people that Border Patrol have to deal with. You've had Governor Greg Abbott, who said in a press release, you can see some of this video right here. This is under the International Highway. Governor Greg Abbott had said that he's having to appeal for federal intervention for some of this, having to, because the state is somehow prevented from actually upholding any kind of immigration and enforcement law. So this is the video that you need to see, because this is what trended. It's mounted, it's the cavalry, right? You have mounted Border Patrol officers who are in an impossible situation in terrain that you can't just drive a car in. And they're trying to stop the flood of illegal entrants who are coming into the country. And that's kind of the real story here. People coming into the country, they're not being, I mean, we're in a height of a pandemic. Your kid has to wear a mask in class, but apparently nothing like this happens at the border. So the story that the Legacy Press wants to run with is that this is proof of America's white supremacy, which is why the media is very careful to only show the same white cowboy over and over again. Let's ignore all the brown people that are also riding horses, because there's another white media stereotype that Hispanic and Latino people can't ride horses and also serve in border enforcement as Border Patrol agents, but whatever. You got Border Patrol cowboys on horses and desperate Haitians. Put them in a still together without context in a photo, and you can tell the following lie if your name is Sawyer Hackett and you work for Julian Castro, who tweeted, and I'm not making this up, quote, "Border Patrol is mounted on horseback rounding up Haitian refugees with whips. This is unfathomable, can't even talk today because I'm so mad about this story, cruelty towards people fleeing disaster and political ruin. The administration must stop this," end quote. Now, you've watched the video. There is no good way to stop thousands of people flooding over your border. There are bad ways and worse ways. Everybody should just follow the law and enter legally like everybody else is required to do, but whatever. But Sawyer Hackett is lying. Those are called split reins. It's a Western style of riding, and it's used to control the horse, and it's also used to protect the horse. And also, when you see as you just did with that Border Patrol agent, you have to have a pretty wide berth to tell the horse where you want to go. And one of the reasons why there's also some slack on those reins is so that there can be protection of the horse and actually protection of the people near the horse so they don't get kicked in the head to death. It's almost like Sawyer Hackett's never been around animals or any kind of working animal ever. I mean, here we're seeing another thing coming up is the difference between, it's like now people who know horses, who are dealing with horses, understand what us in the Second Amendment community have had to deal with for years. People who don't know anything about what you do talking about it. Horses don't have a steering wheel. They have bits in their mouths, and the reins are for them, so you can control a very powerful animal so it doesn't trample someone. Mr. Sawyer Hackett, so apropos of a name, doesn't care about that. For him, truth is entirely subjective. Lies are useful. So all of these videos, all of the photos that were taken from the videos, that's just an opportunity to advance this agenda, and that's all that matters. I mean, I expect this from people like Sawyer Hackett, but watching Jen Psaki run with this narrative is a reminder that all we have are people like Sawyer Hackett running government. There are no adults anymore. There's no one in this administration that's going to tell the truth. These are people who will lie so often, it does not affect them at all whatsoever to do so. This is Vice President Kamala Harris making a statement. The border czar making a statement about this today. Watch this. This was just this afternoon when I was on air after we already had the Border Patrol chiefs, and you also had DHS Secretary Mayorkas saying that no one has a whip and no one's whipping anyone. Even after he said that this morning, you had the VP saying this. Watch.
What I saw depicted about those individuals on horseback treating human beings the way they were is horrible. And I fully support what is happening right now, which is a thorough investigation into exactly what is going on there. But human beings should never be treated that way. And I'm deeply troubled about it. And I'll also be talking with Secretary Mayorkas today about it.
He already contradicted her. He said, look, nobody had any kind of whips. Nobody was whipping any immigrants at all whatsoever. If you know what you're talking about and you watch what the writers were doing, you would see that they are A, trying to protect the horses, and B, trying to turn people back. None of this would be a problem if the border czar, who is the vice president, was doing her job in the first place. None of this would be an issue if the federal government was doing their job. And it is the height of cowardness, and it's absolutely disgusting to put blame on these agents after these elected officials refused to do their jobs, after they refused to even visit the border to see what they were dealing with. That's just reckless and irresponsible. Jen Psaki, White House spokeswoman, after she was asked about Haitians being whipped at the border, I have no words. Watch.
Of course they should never be able to do it again. I don't know what the circumstances would be. It's obviously horrific, the footage. I don't have any more information on it, so let me venture to do that, and we'll see if there's more to convey.
So I really want to know what they think is awful about the footage. Is it awful, the fact that their policies have created a run on the southern border? So you have thousands upon thousands of people, many of them children, who are down there in the heat, down there trying to get clean water, down there trying to get food, turning the border and a lot of people's private land, who themselves are illegal immigrants to the United States, turning their property into like this makeshift third world country. Is that what she finds objectionable about this video footage? Does she find it objectionable, the video footage, to know that the drug cartel is making millions of dollars exploiting the lack of enforcement that's brought on by this administration? Does she find that objectionable? Or does she just think it's objectionable, the fact that you have these Marxist hacks that are spinning tall tales about what Border Patrol agents are doing and counting on people's ignorance on Western riding and horse reins? I can't even believe we're having this conversation, so that they can advance this narrative. We are living in the stupidest period possible on God's green earth. Honestly, this is why aliens don't visit us. This is why if we were hit by the sweet meteor of death tomorrow and the whole planet was wiped out, that's fine. We had it coming to us. Honestly, after you look at these news stories, after you look at the spin coming from elected officials and people who are on television that are supposed to give you the news and not editorializing it, this is despicable. And it's all brought on by the lack of responsibility and unaccountability of this administration. How hard is it to say, come in the legal way like everyone else has done before you? How hard is it to say, we want to just make sure that we know who you are when you're coming into the country? How difficult is it to say that? How difficult is that to enforce that? I mean, do you see how in Texas by the border you have Democrat mayors who are objecting to all of this and screeching at the administration saying this is unsustainable? There's a reason why the Hispanic community is turning more and more conservative. And Republicans, if you don't do something about this, you're going to lose that advantage. Jen Psaki, not doing the hard thing and doing the right thing. You know, she could challenge from the podium. She could have challenged that ridiculous made-up charge. Maybe she could have said, you know what, I really don't think that that's what you're seeing in the video. But no, she did what you would expect her to do. She tries to validate it and try to maintain the advantage of that narrative so that it's useful to her party. Remember, this border crisis, it's beyond a disaster. It is a crisis. It was created by the administration's policies. But that's not what's important to talk about. They knew that they were going to get hit with this story, and so they had to figure out some kind of objection to it that would get the heat off them. So they went with this. And Jen Psaki knows that. She knows that. The legacy press knows that. They know it's an opportunity to reinforce this narrative that America's a big, giant racist country, which is why most of our Border Patrol agents are Hispanic, because of racism. They want to denigrate red state Texans. They want to denigrate anybody who lives at the border. They want to denigrate Border Patrol all at the same time. It's a smear. It's the impugnation of these people's character. But it doesn't care, because you have these elected officials and their spokespeople virtue signaling by acting like they're outraged by a situation they helped to create. So this, we'll keep going with Psaki, because she has to present and spin this information. She does it quite quickly and very shamelessly. Watch this next clip.
We're talking about the situation on the ground in Del Rio. One, it's a challenging situation. It's devastating to watch this footage. I think it's important, though, for people to also know that what we're trying to do is also protect people. One, we've been conveying that this is not the time to come.
A challenging situation? You mean for the administration or for a lot of the kids that are caught up in this, because they have drug cartels playing on their parents' fear and taking advantage of that. You have people who are disregarding law and illegally entering a country. You have an administration that is encouraging it while it's trying to triangulate, to use old 90s term, and act as though that they're really not. They're really above this, and people should just stay home for now. Remember that really confusing soundbite from Mayorkas just, a year ago? This is a problem that the Biden administration created. And I'll say it again, it's a problem that also Republicans contributed to, because not enough of them were stronger on making sure that people entered the country legally. Think about the verbiage that they're all using. It's the exact same phrasing as DHS Mayorkas, the secretary. He says it's not, and this is not by accident, right? Now is not a good time to come. Remember that? Remember that soundbite and quote? Which it kind of suggests that there were good times to come over illegally. And so that's why people are coming. I mean, you're signaling to desperate people that it's fine to come, just not now. But that was a year ago, and that was now. So now it's not now, and people can come. Desperate people, they hear an invitation. They hear a lack of resolve from the government. Psaki knows this, the administration knows this, and they invited and helped build this disaster. And when that happened, they don't want to own any part of it. It's hurt and rescue. You create the problem, and then you blame law enforcement for the problem that you created. And then they take a photo that was only made possible by their broken policies, and they spin it to lie about our Border Patrol, the majority of which, by the way, is Hispanic. I hate that I even have to point that out, but race is the only thing that matters to Marxists who are trying to use that as the new class warfare, bizarrely. And by the way, Haitians and all immigrants pouring across the border, they prove all of this is lies. By that, they're not rushing to come to some white supremacist country. Do you really think so? No, they know that the opposite is true about America, that it's a great country. It's a great country, decent people that will help them. They can get water, they can get food, they can get work. That's why they come. No one risks their life to enter the United States of KKK, a country where they're going to be whipped and denied opportunity because of their skin color. But that's, honestly, by playing into this, that's what the administration is actually spinning. That's the intimation there. It's a blatant lie. It's obvious. And all the people trying to get in the country prove that. But you're supposed to believe that these border agents are evil devils and that they're whipping Haitians. Has anyone stopped to say, why are Haitians coming across the border? Because Haiti's, way over in the Caribbean. Has anyone, stopped to ask that? No? Okay. We're just going to pretend that that's not happening and that it's actually, the past couple of days, the majority has actually been Haitian immigrants and not so much Like people from South America? Okay, I guess we're just going to stick to that. And it's not just Jen Psaki that's running with this framing, by the way. Reuters, Daily Mail, Yahoo, Huffington Post. You guys should see the screen grabs that I have. All running with this lie. But even in the Reuters article, the lie becomes apparent. They won't even say that people were actually whipped. What they say is this. This is such cowardice. Reuters witnesses, this is what they wrote, saw mounted officers wearing cowboy hats and blocking the paths of migrants, and one officer unfurling a cord resembling a lariat. That's not even accurate, which he swung near a migrant's face. A video showing a border guard apparently threatening migrants with the cords was shared on social media, end quote. So once you read the article, it's, well, some people saw something that happened, but they don't know. We don't have any video of it. But, it's the Border Patrol, so probably racism. They're just blocking the paths of people trying to, people trying to enter illegally, I should say. That's why you pay your tax dollars, because that's their job, to prevent people from committing a crime or to at least hold them accountable once they do. And Reuters says that they swung this cord resembling a lariat. Now, I'm going to say this really slowly. It's called a rein, and not like the kind that is in the Toto song, okay? Or R-E-I-G-N. It's a rein, R-E-I-N. That's what you use to steer a horse, because a horse doesn't have a steering wheel. So no one was actually hit. That's the truth. But here's what the headline said of the same Reuters article. Quote, White House condemns border guard use of whip-like cord against Haitian migrants, end quote. So the headline is designed to make you believe that Haitians are being whipped. This is obvious what the press is doing, right? But they're not doing their job, because the narrative has to be served. I want to point this out. You have a woman who was shot and killed in the Capitol building on January 6th of 2020, and the left cheered and said, oh, it was deserved, etc. No matter your opinions of it, you can't deny that people were like, oh yeah, that was well deserved. That's exactly what happened. Here you have a border agent who's just using split reins with Western style horse riding, and everyone is screaming about human rights violations. You have reporters calling reins whips and falsely accusing Border Patrol agents of whipping everybody at the border. And this won't be classified as disinformation. But you sharing a New York Post piece about Hunter Biden's laptop in FBI custody that now Politico confirmed, that's apparently disinformation. But the narrative, our press only exists to serve now Marxist narratives. And at this point, being uninformed and not watching any legacy media or any press conferences from the Biden administration would be better. Honestly, it would. You can't trust a single thing that's coming out of it. And being uninformed is better than being misinformed. Jen Psaki has been spinning these narratives for the White House. They have no bearing in truth. Legacy media exists to amplify this as their purpose. And honestly, we live in an era of information, and never have we been dumber or more brainwashed. So here's the truth. America's a great country. So great, in fact, that Haitians will actually risk their lives by the thousands to come here with their kids. That's the truth of this country. It is a great country, except it's being serviced by some horrible people. Coming up, a lawsuit's been filed against New York State's universal school mask mandate, but New York State Senator George Borrello is part of the suit filed Friday. He joins me next to discuss. Stay with us. Black Rifle Coffee Company is a veteran-owned coffee company that serves premium coffee to people who love America. They develop their explosive roast profiles with the same mission focus that they've learned while serving our great nation. And with every purchase you make, Black Rifle Coffee gives back. In 2020, they donated over 6 million cups of coffee to veteran, law enforcement, and first responder causes. Their high-quality coffee beans are imported all the way from Colombia and Brazil and then carefully roasted at their facilities in Tennessee and Utah. They even have a signature roast called Lava Panther that's directly sourced from a small farm in Guatemala. So although temperatures are not cooling off in Texas, don't forget to keep enjoying the great outdoors fueled by Black Rifle Coffee. The best way to do it is to join the Black Rifle Coffee Club. And when you join, your chosen brews roasted, packaged, and shipped free to your door. You can also get special discounts and gain access to exclusive products and a lot more. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/Dana and use code Dana at checkout for 20% off your purchase and your first coffee club order. A lawsuit has been filed against New York schools' universal mask mandates for students. New York State Senator George Borrello is part of that suit that was filed Friday. He says that they've overstepped their authority with these mandates. State Senator George Borrello joins me now. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us about this, because the way I understand it, all the kids would have to do is just pretend they're at the Met Gala and then they have their justification for not having to have their face covered, as I understand it.
Well, yeah, there's certainly a large amount of hypocrisy here. That's rather common, unfortunately. I think when you look at this, and I want to echo something I know that you have said, that just because I'm against mandates doesn't mean I'm against masks or vaccines. This is about mandates, and I think probably the number one lesson that we have learned from this pandemic is that handing this unfettered dictatorial power to the executive branch is dangerous. It's dangerous for our democracy. And that's the basis of this lawsuit. The New York State Department of Health has overstepped its bounds. It has filed this mandate, and the justification just isn't there. They literally have avoided giving any kind of a true justification for why this emergency can be enacted. They have this workaround over normal procedures, and they've used this workaround to create this emergency mandate without giving the proper justification. Therefore, they are in violation of the separation of powers here.
Yeah, and that should be, you would think that would be the end of the discussion, but unfortunately it's not. And what bothers me is this assumption by whether it's the Department of Health or whomever, whether it's in New York or elsewhere, that parents don't have their children's best interest at heart. I mean, obviously, if a parent thinks that this is the best benefit of their child, they'll make that decision, and their child will wear a mask, and that's how they'll go about their day in school. And it really should be left up to the parents who know their kids better than anybody. And this universal one-size-fits-all approach isn't the best way. And from what I understand, as it is, it's really with how it's been elsewhere, including California, also with this mandate, there's no exception. Like, what if a student has asthma? What if there's, some kind of some other issue? I mean, there are actual reports of students who are actually allergic to those types of face coverings, and they're not able to wear something like that for a full, multi-hour day. Those exclusions aren't taken into consideration, which then makes me think, is this really about the health and the best practice for kids and teachers and faculty?
Well, and that brings up a good point. Part of an emergency justification is to say, here's all the things that we are going to do. And they just dropped this on everyone, and it created some chaos. It started off with a mandate that all of a sudden 2-year-olds had to be masked in daycare centers. And that created a lot of problems. But on top of that, if you really want to get people to comply, it's not by forcing them to do so. It's by educating them. It's by coming up with common sense alternatives, like you said. If a family says, I don't want to send my child to school with a mask on, do you have a plan to ensure that child is still going to be able to learn through remote learning or whatever it might be? And the answer is no, there is no plan. They just expect they're going to force this down our throats and we're going to comply. And that is not how you get people to do things. That's just a classic example of how things have happened in New York State, especially with our previous governor, Andrew Cuomo. So despite the corrupt dictator that he was, even he said he wouldn't have the authority to do this before he left office. So it makes me question, why are we going to continue down this road when we know that the disastrous outcomes of our previous governor and his dictatorial actions and during the pandemic?
Yeah, I have to ask you as well about the news that came out the past couple of days, somewhat similar to this. And as you are, like, I like vaccines. I love vaccines. I previously wore masks before there was ever a mandate during flu season. I just have a problem with mandates. That's what I dislike. And with this, the vaccine mandate in New York City, I'm sure you saw at this point the video what happened at Carmine's. You had some women who were visiting from Texas, and they were asked whether or not they could prove their vaccination status, and if they couldn't prove it, they would have to leave. They were joined by some other gentlemen, and the party, because I know this is important to the Marxists that are kind of on that are on the left, they were all black, and then there was a fight that erupted, and now Black Lives Matter is protesting Carmine's because they say that it's a plan that, it was very interesting, their choice of words. They said that the mandate itself is a plan that covers racism because it's separating individuals, and of course, obviously pointing out that one of the largest demographics in America that are considered vaccine hesitant, of course, Black Americans, and there's a lot of history there. I wanted to get your thoughts on just that video and this division that's being created by some of these perhaps not well thought out policies.
Well, you brought up the Marxism, and let's face it, this is exactly the whole idea that the Marxists, number one, never let a crisis go to waste. We know that is this pandemic. This is their opportunity to push their Marxist values on America. But also, it's about creating the whole idea of the oppressor and the oppressed. That is what they are doing here. And when you see these kind of things in action, it's horrible. I'm in the restaurant business, my wife and I, and it's the hospitality business. And when if they choose to say you have to wear a mask or you have to be vaccinated, that's up to you. But when it's being forced upon people, and you're putting some young host or hostess in the position of having to be your vaccine czar, that's always going to end in badly, unfortunately. And this is the part that they don't understand, that they are trying to implement something that is fundamentally flawed. We want to protect people, absolutely. But at the end of the day, you're not going to take a restaurant worker and make them, your vaccine enforcer, and however that works. And that's the problem that I think is creating chaos in places like New York.
Yeah. One last question for you, Senator. Going back to this suit, do you think that you're going to be able to throw this decision back to where it rightfully belongs within the parental jurisdiction? Are you optimistic about how this is going to be resolved?
Well, it depends on who the judge is and who hears this case. But fundamentally, you will look at this and you will see that they did not follow the proper procedures to file this emergency mandate. And ultimately, this should be a local decision at the very least. And like I said, I am not against children wearing masks in school. I am, however, against government overreach and the erosion of our separation of power. And unfortunately, here in New York State, our state legislature has become very comfortable with basically ceding all of their authority to the executive branch. They like not having to make those decisions. And that is truly a problem. We're seeing this across the country. People that have now gone from being governors to dictators, and folks that are more than willing to abdicate that power. And that's what we have to push back against. This is never acceptable, and especially now.
I agree. George Borrello, New York State Senator. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you. Thanks for your fight. Coming up, folks, the White House, legacy press, malfeasance. That's how it always works, right? One covering up for the other. Tim Graham from Newsbusters joins me next to discuss. How much equity do you have in your home? Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity they have, the greater the chance that criminals could target them. Home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes, and Home Title Lock, America's leader in home title protection, is warning homeowners that they could be potentially victims and not even know it. Cyber thieves can search hundreds of public databases for high equity homes. They can find your home's online title, forge your signatures stating that you sold your home, and take out loans using your equity. Insurance and common identity theft programs are not going to cover you. So protect your most valuable asset. Register your address to see if you could potentially be a victim and receive a complete title history of your home, a $100 value for free. Visit HometitleLock.com. It's not a secret that legacy press covers for the administration, whether it's the border to Afghanistan, to that rally for justice this weekend, to the laptop story. We've seen an onslaught of media malpractice that actually goes back over 10 years, over a decade, maybe over 20 years. Joining me now to discuss all this, Tim Graham, executive editor for Newsbusters and director of media analysis for the Media Research Center. Tim, it's good to see you. So I have to ask you, I was tweeting about this a little earlier, and I'm always amazed at the stands, the bots that are paid by, I guess, the Biden brigade to go and argue with anyone on social media that talks about the laptop, right? So Politico acts like it's a very new revelation. They know that, I mean, there's a book that's coming out written by one of the folks with whom they're friendly, and it's called The Bidens, and there's excerpts of this book that's coming out, and oh my gosh, they're confirming that everything basically that you and me and everyone else has been talking about from this New York Post story, the emails, the Russia deals, the China business, etc., that it's all legit, it's been confirmed, and Politico is writing about it now. So Tim, my big question is, are they going to be suspended like most of us were for sharing that story that is actually now confirmed on social media?
I think the answer is the election's over, so it's safe now. This is one of those things where they have this curious tendency to say that to call something unsubstantiated, and then you say, well, will you be attempting to substantiate it? Oh, no, we prefer it this way. And this is what they did to John Kerry and the Swift boat veterans back in 2004. This is the same playbook, which is, well, what you're saying is unsubstantiated. Well, you can look at these emails. You could look at what the New York Post had. You could look at the pictures and stuff that the Daily Mail had back at the time. It was quite
And the
obvious.
video, heaven forbid.
Yeah.
I would encourage people not to look at those videos. One auto-played for me on a Daily Mail site, and I lost 5 years off my life.
It was there, and it was confirmable. And they just decided, well, this has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation. We made a video here just running the 76 times they said hallmarks of Russian disinformation. I mean, this is what they do. They all run the same talking points that you can't trust what you can obviously see.
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing that gets me. And I know Glenn Greenwald says it's a CIA op. It's the CIA telling everyone that this is Russian disinformation. This is why you can't trust FBI or CIA, which I would agree even without the story. But I mean, as you were just saying, I mean, you can see stuff with your own eyes, right? I mean, you can see that. I mean, some of it you don't want to see with your own eyes. I mean, eye bleach, we joke about it, but I mean, I wish it was a real product. It exists out there. And then, of course, the emails where they talk about making sure the big guy gets his cut. Well, the big guy being referenced is Joe Biden, whether it's talking about any kind of some Ukrainian business or business contacts and associations and processes with Chinese business deals. I mean, it's all in these emails, so it's all been confirmed now. And what gets me is that this would have been a huge, huge deal during the election if this were to come out, had it come out. I mean, and even more so like it did before the vote happened. But it was downplayed, it was suppressed, people were suspended. Everyone who shared it was called a conspiracy theorist. You guys were all called conspiracy theorists because you were pointing out the media malpractice here. So what's the point of the press anymore? Because this obviously is something that they exist to do, to vet this stuff. Now they don't. So what are they anymore? Because it's not a free press.
Yeah, I mean, this is the point, is that I think it's become quite clear that maybe we've gone back to what you might consider the colonial model or the early American model, where you just have partisan press outlets, defending one politician or another. But I think people are looking for the real story. And there are two stories really about Hunter Biden, or two tracks. And that is, there is that serious policy-oriented side where it's like, how is he using his influence? How is the Obama administration spinning their foreign policy to help Joe Biden or Hunter Biden's businesses? What's going on there? And then there's that whole seamy underbelly. These are the same people that love to talk about Stormy Daniels and Stormy Daniels' porn films. And then suddenly when Hunter wants to make porn films, well, that's too undignified for network TV. So, I mean, that's that double standard of the crazy stuff of what he was doing in his personal life, just as off limits as what he was doing in his political life.
Well, Tim, it's off limits because that's the president's baby infant son. Baby 50-year-old something infant Hunter Biden.
Yes, well, I do remember CNN having Jill Biden and basically saying, he's the center of the family. Like, boy, if that's the center, you better worry about everybody on the outside. I mean, it is crazy the way that they have glossed over the Bidens, made them this romantic story, right. And not wanting to look into their finances, not wanting to be cynical or even skeptical about who they are and what they've
right.
done.
And to this, I mean, this has always been about Joe Biden and his business dealings. It's always been about Joe Biden merching out his office. And I do think, to an extent, not all of us, but I think some of our fellow conservatives, or Republicans, I guess you could say, on our side of the aisle, really did kind of go after with gusto, I think, the Hunter Biden thing, which ultimately, if I was a leftist, I would want to make this about Hunter Biden as much as possible, and not about, that way it gives an escape, it gives Joe Biden an escape, so nobody's talking about how this guy was aware of all of the business dealings, and he was making, bank off of it and selling his influence and access to the vice presidential office. And instead, we talk about, they're talking about, the all the other stuff that Hunter Biden did. And the media, I think they played into that, and smartly so. Your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting to me that when President Trump was in office and they decided not only are his tax returns and his businesses subject of journalism, so is Ivanka's business. So is what Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr. are doing. And you could look at that and say, okay, that's a legitimate form of inquiry. This is where you just simply say, why are the Trump tax returns a hot story and not the Biden tax returns? Why not the Biden children and their businesses? Not to mention the Biden brothers and their businesses. They're just not interested in that. The Biden son-in-law, Howard Krein. These are all stories that they're like, we have no time. We have no resources. And they still have reporters. They're obviously still digging around in everything Trump.
Yeah. I got to switch gears. The other big story here, Tim, as you know, I can't wait to see your coverage of cable news tonight and how they all discuss the reins story, the horse riding, the border agents on horseback with the reins. I mean, at first I felt like everything I had dropped into some sort of Babylon Bee alternate universe because there was no way that the headlines I was seeing were real. But I mean, bizarrely, they were. And you had verified reporters, you had editors, you had these people who were on CNN and MSNBC and the Vice President of the United States, the White House, all saying that these border agents who were using horse reins, because that's what they were using, that they were instead had whips and they were beating Haitian immigrants. But at least now, Tim, they're talking about the border, right?
It is serious enough, but this is where you want to turn around and say, wait a minute. This is the U.S. Border Patrol under Biden. These are Biden's civil servants. You know, it's kind of amazing. You remember that all these same press people, that whenever you question the FBI or any piece of the government under Trump, it was like, how dare you question the government? And now it's like, now that if it matches their narrative that the Border Patrol is a bunch of violent racists, I mean, it is embarrassing. It's embarrassing for Joy Reid or Chris Cuomo or anybody who bid on this. The broadcast networks, too. If you can't tell the difference between a whip and horse reins, maybe you're not qualified to be doing the news, if you can even call it the news anymore.
That's a good point. You know what? And you just also made me think, if it was Trump putting kids in cages, even though it was an Obama-Biden policy and Biden continued to do it, then this is Biden whipping people at the border then.
Yeah, he's never responsible for anything. Just the way every COVID death under Trump was on Trump. They treated it like he lost 50,000 soldiers in Vietnam. They had all those analogies. Not one COVID death under Biden is ever Biden's fault. And if you can say, okay, that's fair, well, then why don't you hold both presidents in the same way? And this is where I just think the news media was always just the hit squad against Trump. And all time, all defense when it comes to Biden.
I know, like right now in the lower third of our screen right now, it says horse whipping narrative debunk. I'm going to challenge that and say, no, Joe Biden's administration is whipping Haitians at the border. Whipping them to death at the border. That's the story, right? Isn't that what the media would do? I mean, we should listen to our moral betters, right, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, and the irony is I think they're using these reins to keep the horses from stomping on the Haitians. The funny thing about this is, yes, this is how you get them to cover the border. When they've assembled in this number, where they are a small town under a bridge, 12, 15,000 people, it gets awfully hard for them to ignore. But, they use language then where they start saying, oh, these things are happening to Biden. He faces things. It's never Biden did this by trying to say, don't come.
Yeah, and that's it. And that never made any sense. That was the most confusing thing that we've made fun of it here, but it was the most confusing thing I've ever heard any elected official say. Well, don't come now. And that was a year ago. So I guess that was now. So now they can come.
Well, and all their policies in general were always, basically the announcement went to Central America, which was, we're repealing the Trump regime.
Right.
Everybody understood that.
Yeah.
So, yes, everybody who's rushed across the border got the messaging. And that should be something that journalists, if they were hard-boiled, objective, neutral people, would say the border crisis is something that's on Trump or on Biden. And, we've noticed 2 months ago, 4 minutes of network evening news, and then in August, 6 minutes. We'll get a bigger number in September. But they've tried so hard to say there is no crisis. There basically is no border story. It took this much illegal immigration for them to notice.
Yeah, there you have it. Tim Graham with Newsbusters MRC Media Research Center. Tim, always a pleasure. Appreciate the work you do. Keep it up.
My pleasure.
Take care. All right, folks, coming up, we follow the science. Stay with us. There's a lot of talk about the fracturing of our society into elite class, and a class of serfs or workers. Of course, there was always an elite ruling class in America and a working class, but never before was the gap between these two voluntary classes so stark and so keenly felt. We all know the super wealthy have certain privileges, but for the most part, no one cared in America. We're all wealthy in any historical sense anyway, and supremely blessed to live in this country. So class warfare has never really been a thing. But that mask, those COVID face diapers our elites are so fond of, nothing so clearly signifies the gap between the elite class and the working class these days when the much debated mask comes, and you can see it right on somebody's face when somebody comes and they're wearing it. So you can tell increasingly who is who simply by looking at who is wearing a face diaper and who isn't. So let's do a little a slideshow. This here is a photo from the Met Gala. Look at the reporters and servers. The serfs, they're masked. Look at the celebrities. That man forgot his shirt. It's Camila Cabello's boyfriend. This is the Emmys. Everyone is maskless again. She forgot her clothes. Look at all those people without their masks. Apparently, while looking like an orange sickle in his orange suit, Seth Rogen riffed while he was presenting at the Emmys, which no one watched, that it was very dangerous that they were all together in a room like that, because of the COVID. But of course, then the LA County Department of Public Health was quick to correct him, and they declared the event was COVID safe. All those people were exempt from following the face diaper mandate that all you other poors had to follow. Now, of course, the Department of Health says, yes, there were extra safety modifications in place. And yes, everyone had to be fully vaxxed, even though that doesn't mean anything anymore. But they also had a verified negative COVID test within 48 hours of the show. Crew members were either fully vaxxed or they had to be tested within that 48-hour period. And overall, the Public Health Office says that the Emmys reached out to share its safety protocols, which they say, quote, exceeded the baseline requirements for television and film productions, end quote. But just cut through it. I mean, what's going on is you have a bunch of elites that got together to give each other Emmys and backpats, and so they don't have to wear face diapers because they're special, and the LA Department of Public Health says so. Now, here's some of Palm Beach County School Board. They defied Governor DeSantis. They said it's fair. All these people here in their stupid hats. They said, yes, your kids have to wear a mask in school, but here they're having a lot of fun at a gala without masks. And of course, they want your kids masked, but all of these Karens right here, look at that diversity. All of those Karens, so diverse. None of them have to wear a face mask at their super ritzy housewives of whatever county gala. They're totally and completely safe, right? Because you guys don't know, it's science. If you are white and Democrat and a celebrity, you don't get as infected because it doesn't matter. We all know that masks aren't about safety. It's about control. It's about submission. Finally, here's a maskless San Francisco Mayor London Breed. Now look, your girl loved some Tony back in the day in the 90s. Saw them at Six Flags when I was a teenager. She's partying up in a nightclub. And she said that the spirit moved her because, the brother, Tony hadn't played together like that in 20 some odd years. Now remember, these people are supposed to be your authoritative figures, right? These are the same people who tell you that you have to wear a mask and your kids have to wear a mask. Otherwise, you're murdering everyone. But they don't. We're all in this together, remember? Except for the ruling elite. They're not living through the same pandemic as you and your family. Oh, hell no. They have their jobs. They're even richer. And they have their power. And in fact, their power has grown. And they have the right to breathe freely, even as they take your rights away. And they don't even try to hide it. They defend policies that would force an asthmatic 2-year-old to be kicked off a plane for not wearing a mask. Now, as I said, Mayor London Breed said she was feeling the spirit when she was taking off her mask in that club. So when you're an elite, any reason is reason enough to justify a different set of rules for you. And now people will accept that some people have more than others. But one thing they won't stand for is when the rules aren't also applied to everyone equally. Eventually, the working class folks will rebel. So I'll end with these images coming up out of Australia. The Australians have been in various states of brutal lockdown for over 18 months and are also feeling like their overlords are not having to live like them, so they're not listening to people anymore either. So this happened. Tyranny from people who hold themselves to be better than others always produces a response. It's predictable. Now look at this. These are construction workers that are pushing back against police in that video. They were done being told what to do, and they're done with the hypocrisy, and they're done with the double standards. Push people far enough, and they push back. That does it for us tonight. Thanks for tuning in. Good night, and don't bend the knee.